good evening, and welcome back to another Frightday Nights special. Now, we've all heard of imaginary friends, those special yet strange companions which accompany children on so many of their wondrous adventures. But what if that unseen figure was something more? Something menacing. It was in early November of 1997 that a series of strange sessions led a child psychologist in Maine to contact authorities. It began when a patient of his began to tell him about one of their friends. This friend being imaginary as far as both the psychiatrist and the boy's parents were concerned. He called his friend Mr.Smile and would talk about him at great length during sessions. The boy called him Mr. Smile, both because he would always be smiling, and because when he was around, the boy said everything felt happy. He said that there was a feeling of everything being okay. Now the boy in question was being treated for serious issues to do with anger and depression. But when Mr. Smile was around, he said that all the anger and sadness seemed to just disappear. He said that Mr. Smile wouldn't speak, but rather just stand there at the foot of his bed. He smelled like cotton candy, and just by being there, he made the boy feel calm and safe. The psychiatrist assumed this imaginary friend was some sort of coping mechanism the boy had developed to deal with the problems at home that had led to his violent temper, and thought nothing much of it until another patient, a girl of about 9 years old, also began talking about her imaginary friend, Mr. Smile. And then a boy of 7, a boy of 12, another girl of 11. All in all, close to 15 separate patients all began to talk to the psychiatrist about Mr. Smile. The first few he had put down to perhaps coincidence. After all, many children have imaginary friends, and the name and description of Mr. Smile were just generic enough that it didn't concern him too much at first. But as more and more of his patients told him about Mr. Smile, he began to grow concerned, and he started to ask for more details. Every single one of the children described Mr. Smile the same way, using the exact same words. Now, there was no way that all these children could be in contact with each other. 5 of them, for instance, were currently being homeschooled, and according to their parents, when he spoke to them, never really even left the house, except when it was to accompany their parents on shopping trips and the like. There was no way that every single one of these children could have rehearsed or prepared their statements together, which led the psychiatrist to a deeply disturbing conclusion. The psychiatrist spoke privately with each of the children's parents, one at a time. He avoided disclosing too much information, but told them that something troubling had cropped up in multiple sessions with various patients, and that he believed there was a chance their child was at risk. He asked for their permission to discuss matters with the authorities, and the parents gave their consent, provided they were kept in the loop as to what was going on. And so, over the course of the next week, the police came and spoke to each of the children about their friend. They asked for details about his appearance, of which they couldn't seem to describe, apart from the smile, and that he was not like them. How he got into their house, anything he said or did while he was there. Because by that point, the psychiatrist, the parents, and the police were all convinced that Mr. Smile was quite real and quite dangerous. The authorities had checked to make sure that there were no known individuals living in the area, which they had confirmed was not the case. But it was quite clear that whoever this Mr. Smile was, he was a real person who had been sneaking into the homes of these children at night. None of the children claimed to know how he got in. They said they would just wake up and he would be there at the foot of the bed. Sometimes they said he would be singing something, not in English or any known language that they were able to describe. It sounded something like a lullaby, they said. It made them feel safe. Finally, the children were asked to draw Mr. Smile, as they couldn't put into words how he looked. Each and every one of the children would pick up a red crayon and proceed to color in the entire page until it was just a rectangle of red. When asked about this, they insisted they had drawn Mr. Smile. When asked where his head, arms, and legs were, they would insist that they had drawn those. They claimed that they had drawn a perfect picture of the man at the foot of their bed, and when they were told that they had simply colored in the page and not drawn anything at all, they became deeply angry, feeling that they were being accused of lying and insisting that what they had drawn was a picture of the man that they had seen. Acting more on a hunch than anything else, the psychiatrist decided to show one of the colored-in rectangles to the various children and asked them what it was. Now each and every one of them, with no knowledge of what the picture was supposed to be, or even who had drawn it, and no knowledge that the other children that had been spoken to about this subject even existed, replied that it was a picture of Mr. Smile. In a panic, parents placed cameras and monitoring devices of all sorts in their children's room, so they and the authorities could make sure the children were monitored. Many of the parents simply stopped sleeping altogether, staying up all night, staring at screens that displayed where their children slept. However, at no point did anyone enter or exit the bedrooms. No sounds except for the snoring of children or occasional talking in their sleep were heard over the devices. There was never any sign of Mr. Smile. After almost 2 weeks of this, many of them began to doubt that Mr. Smile had ever existed in the first place. Other psychiatrists had simply put the whole thing down as some strange shared delusion that, while it couldn't be explained, didn't really have any basis in any real occurrence. Some suggested that maybe this whole Mr. Smile thing had its basis in a TV show or some obscure film that the children had all at some point or another watched and led them all to dreaming up something similar. That is, until one of the boys went missing. The camera in his room had gone dead at around 2 in the morning. His mother had run to check on him, only to find the room empty. It had literally taken her less than a minute to cover the distance between her and his room. There was no possible way for him to leave or be taken and be gone from her sight in the time it took. But all the same, he was gone. And when she arrived in the room, she reported that it smelled like cotton candy. The search for the boy turned up nothing. No one had seen anything strange or unusual around the home before or during the disappearance, and no trace of him was ever found. It was less than a week later that one of the girls who had spoken of Mr. Smile vanished as well. Then another, and then another, and then another of the children. One by one, each of them disappeared until only 4 remained. The 4 remaining children began to talk in their sessions about how Mr. Smile and his friends were coming to take them away soon. When asked about these friends, they talked about how Mr. Smile lived with other smiling men in the happy place, and that he would take them there soon. They said that there were lots of people there already, and that in the happy place everything was beautiful. They said that they knew about it because Mr. Smile talked to them in their heads, because he couldn't talk like other people did, and that he would show them pictures in their heads of the place they were going. Yet, as time wore on, and the children were continually watched, things became increasingly disturbing. After a few weeks, the children began complaining about headaches and nausea. Their schools reported that they had begun to suffer hallucinations and outbursts, and 2 of them started complaining that they didn't like the place that Mr. Smile was showing them anymore. One began to scream for half an hour, acting as if they were having a fit and screaming for the colors to stop, that the colors were horrible and they needed them to go away. One of the children claimed that Mr. Smile was talking to them in their head all of the time now and was telling them things, terrible things, that they couldn't talk about and that they mustn't because their parents would know about the terrible things too. The psychiatrist asked them to write down what Mr. Smile was saying, promising that he would show it to no one, and managing to gain the trust of one of the boys enough that he agreed. The contents of that book to this day are known only to him and the authorities, but whenever anyone has been asked about it, they only become extremely quiet and quickly find a way to change the subject. The situation of the children only seemed to deteriorate from there. All of them stopped sleeping. Footage from security cameras would show them sitting bolt upright in bed, their eyes unblinking, just staring at the wall without moving or making a sound. Sedatives did nothing. One of the girls began marking her skin with strange circular patterns, while 2 of the other boys ceased communicating in English altogether. The language they spoke was nothing like English, and despite numerous translators being tapped to try and figure it out, was never identified. By 1999, all 4 of the children had somehow, even under isolation and constant monitoring, managed to vanish into thin air. There was never any trace of who took them. Searches even to this day, have turned up nothing, and no indication as to where they went, or even if they still draw breath. All four, and even the others, seem to have simply vanished, like smoke in the wind. And all remain missing. The disappearance is unexplained. Quite the terrifying tale indeed, if I have to say. It really makes you think twice about just how chilling childhood companions of the mind's making can turn out to be. But I hope you enjoyed that. I'm working hard to hand out more horror and nightmarish narrations for all of your eerie evening needs. So make sure you keep your eyes out for that and anything else that might lurk in the shadows. Until next time, Cabalites. Have you seen the violet sign?